Good morning. Yes, thank you. So as my title suggests, Public Works, AEC, and Survey. So with the Public Works, I tend to deal with Public Works departments all across the United States and actually the rest of the world. And of course, here in the domestic United States, we have kind of the aging infrastructure challenge. So that's why I get involved with all things, potholes, water main breaks, things like that. And so Shannon asked me to kind of talk about how geodesign and the AEC markets kind of come together. And much like Shannon is involved with the Geodesign Summit, we have an AEC Summit that's just before our summer user conference. And so we'll talk a little bit later on. But he wanted me to kind of give a practical viewpoint, so to speak. So the infrastructure life cycle. Here you see a diagram of 4 phases, from plan to design to build to operate. And you may have seen this diagram hundreds, thousands of times. You might say, well, there's 6 phases, or there's 7 phases if you're looking at REBA in the UK. And so, but to suffice to say for this morning, I'm going to talk about these 4 phases that occur throughout the infrastructure life cycle. But I also want to talk about these levels of understanding, if you will, throughout these phases. There's kind of this outer core as we move to the inner core, and that you might think of this as minimum amounts of data, core data, what I like to call dog tag data, data that's name, rank, serial number of a given asset, let's say, diameter, material, different things like that. But also you can dive deep into an understanding of data like build sheets and material specifications and things like that. But this could also be a scalar issue, from a regional scale down to a local scale, all the way down to the asset scale. Could be a 2D issue, a 3D issue. So really there's these different levels of understanding, if you will, as you go through these various phases. So I kind of like to also call this my Shrek theory. You'll start to get real complicated so early in the morning, but so I assume folks know Shrek, ogres, they're like onions, layers upon layers, very complicated. So let's get into this with kind of bringing this all together, the different phases and these different levels of understanding. So we kind of start off in the planning process of a regional perspective, right? We kind of want to understand as you've been learning about geodesign, understanding how the natural and built environments come together. When they're done correctly, things are good. When they're done incorrectly, we have this collision. We have things that don't go quite so well. So when we start a planning process, we really want to know a regional perspective. So we have a very broad scope. We have large scale. And we want to tie in lots of different pieces of information, because we may not know exactly what we need to know yet when we go into this process. Then as we kind of start to fine-tune the information for the project, we start to apply some filters. This doesn't really mean a reduced set of data. It means I might have some analytical results. I might start to understand some scenarios. I kind of go into maybe some corridor analysis. But I'm starting to kind of refine my intent, right? Because all infrastructure should have intent. I'm building something for a reason. And then as we go into our site specifics, we've really narrowed that scope. We're really starting to understand what we're doing. We have the data that we need to efficiently and sufficiently characterize that particular site. So now we're ready to go. Into conceptual design. So we kind of hand this information over. We've gone from the planning stages to, say, the design engineers, and they're starting to now refine specifics maybe about that given asset, right? I'm starting to understand maybe what type of pipe materials I want, those sorts of things. And then I can go into, say, 30% design, and any one of these individual steps, too. People can say, oh, well, Dave, there's 30% design, 50% design, things like that. But again, suffice to say for this morning, 30% design, I'm starting to understand now more specifics. I've done maybe some scenario planning on the infrastructure itself. I've done what we'd call value engineering or optioneering. where maybe I've now understood I had a choice of, say, ductile iron or a stainless steel or maybe HDPE for my pipe materials, and I've chosen a specific material, and I'm starting to go on. Then when I get into my final design, now I have all these engineering grade pieces of information. I've got build sheets, I've got all my CAD drawings, I might even have some very site-specific data that I started to collect some survey information that allows me to kind of dial that all in. I have this collective set now of data. Well, and that kind of gets turned over to our contractors when we go into our build process. And notice this slice of pie is a bit thin. They kind of have all this information that's been collected. But quite honestly, when I give these talks about civil engineering, when I go into this next one, where we actually start to prep the site, we typically find, contractors they don't really throw away all that data, but they really kind of fine tune and use what they need, So when I talk about when things are built, I'll say, oh, of course, the contractor built everything exactly the way you designed it. And of course, there's just lots of laughter, and civil engineers go, ha, ha, ha. And that's just kind of the reality of the story. So again, this was kind of a practical overview. So we're in this prep stage, and again, that information's not really lost, but it just may not be used effectively. But then as they go into the construction process, they too are adding their own pieces of information, right? They're starting to get various pieces of information, their field notes, they've maybe had to do some change orders because of in situ conditions, didn't realize there was this large granitic body in the way, those sorts of things. So they make changes, and they're starting to add data to that. Then as we get to that final as-built state, they now too have a wealth of information. And with this information, they may also have all those design drawings that they got from the design firm, may or may not have used, they just conceptually use them, but they have this entire package, this deliverable, that we're at this as-built stage. And for those of us in the asset management world, this is kind of T equals 0, right? That's when these assets are ready to go. And so when these assets are commissioned, so that road has traffic on it, that water main is pressurized, it's chlorinated, serving clean water to the public, we're in this commission state, we're in this operational state, and many times we call this the kind of the do-nothing state, right? It's the asset's fully functional, it's in great condition, ready to serve the public, and off it goes. So you're just kind of operating this thing as it's moving along, till you have your first failure, right? So you have that first water main break, that first pothole. Now you're starting to think, I need more information, right? I need to start to understand its condition. So I'm starting to collect data, storing this in maybe my work management system, my inspection system, things like that. And now I'm starting, again, back into the asset management world. I'm in a bathtub curve. I'm in this wear-out period, so I'm collecting this data. Well then, I've had so many failures that it's time to rehabilitate. I may have to replace that. But that stage, that operational stage, while we were maybe 18 to 36 months in that whole previous set of phases, this has been 20, 50, 75 years. My environment has changed. My intent has changed. Instead of 100 homes, I'm now serving 200 homes. So when I go to replace this asset, I might have to upsize it. So my world has changed. So I have to broaden my horizons again. And I have to go back to this regional understanding of the natural and built environment to effectively do, in essence, start the process all over again when I rehabilitate that piece of infrastructure. But take note, all the white space, right? So wouldn't it be great when I go into this rehabilitation phase, though, if I had known what the early planners had wanted to do from a regional context, if I had known what those design engineers had thought when they went into their final design and the options that they kind of dismissed, and gee, when my contractor turned the assets over to me, all those field notes, all that field information, right, that deep-seated data, wouldn't it have been nice to have all that information? But as the white space suggests, sometimes it might still be there, you just can't get to it. Right? So one of the things that we're going to see here when I turn it over to Eric is how our products such as GeoPlanner, CityEngine, ArcGIS Pro kind of start to fill that gap, right? How the platform kind of facilitates the communication of that information in all phases and all levels of understanding. So I mentioned the AEC Summit. So July 18th through the 21st, bit of a shameless plug for my summit. The 18th and 19th, that weekend prior. With your registration, you get the full day Monday plenary plus Tuesday, user papers. And so we tend to focus, we include, if you will, the build and operate phases, but really we actually talk about all phases. So at the AEC Summit, from an engineering surveying perspective, you see the plan, design, build, operate, and maintain. And we start to kind of go into detailed workflows. We actually also bring in, say, partner solutions that tend to specialize, say, in the design build space, partners like Carlson and things like that kind of tend to specialize. We also, bring out products that, like ArcGIS for AutoCAD, that natively sits in a CAD environment, but works seamlessly with the platform to facilitate this data exchange. But really what we also do at the AEC Summit, we call it the Forum for High Accuracy, because behind all of these phases, all of these levels of understanding, we all tie it down into ground control, right? We very much focus on that page space to real world space conversion. We talk about precision, we talk about low distortion projection systems, we talk about even folks like the Navajo Nation, who they're so large in the state of Arizona, the reservation's so large that they cross 5 state planes, 2 UTMs. For a comprehensive flood mitigation program, they developed their own datum. So the Navajo Nation created their own datum with the ArcGIS platform so they could have a singular reference datum for all of their flood mitigation work, right? So again, I would encourage you to, the Geodesign Summit sparks your interest. Also think about the AEC Summit, where we kind of take a more civil engineering approach, if you will, a boundary surveying, we tie in cadastre and right-of-ways and all those sorts of things. So again, AEC Summit that weekend prior, but what I would like to do, hopefully we've set the stage of kind of this infrastructure life cycle and the flow of data and kind of that ebb and flow, this living, breathing environment, so to speak. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric,